Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
It's really something that we don't normally think about, but it is the backbone of what we do when we patronize the business. There are business ethics that are in place, whether it's a small local business, whether you're buying on Amazon, whatever it might be. And we're going to look at that today a little bit deeper. And he is somebody that analyzes cases, has really worked with them in terms of grooming others as an adjunct professor of business ethics, senior researcher and director, and so much more. Ronald Berenbeim is back with us. Ronald, welcome back. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine, Steve. How you doing?
Wonderful. Great to have you here. And we got lots to talk about today in terms of looking at a case or illustrating a fictitious case, but it's also based on real world practices. Where do we start today? What do you feel?
Okay, well, let me just lay out the frame that we're going to use to analyze this based on the Kohlberg principles that we discussed last week. There are basically, at least Kohlberg thinks, three stages of morality. There is pre-conventional, and that is, more or less, I do what I please or what the situation seems to require. And you have a continuum, basically beginning with utilitarianism and extreme utilitarianism, which is ethical egoism. Bentham said the greatest good for the greatest number, and ethical egoism says there is only one number, and that is me. And then at the other end of that continuum is Kantian moralism, which thinks in terms of universal principles. And I gave then as an example the 10 Commandments. These are mandates that one tries to comply with, but in some cases you can try to figure out just exactly how these mandates may sound absolute, but for example, thou shalt not kill. Well, obviously there's a lot of killing that goes on in the Bible, in warfare and so on and so forth. Then the second stage is conventional morality, and these would be generally accepted business practices would be the utilitarian end, and at the other end would be the desire to achieve some sort of improvement in business practices. So you have generally accepted principles at one end, and maybe you have something like Emily Post at the other end. Not mandated, but, the fork is supposed to go on the left side, and that's what people expect. And then the third stage is post-conventional, where these principles are enshrined either in the ethics of the profession, as they are in the case of law or medicine, or they are, that would be one end, and the other end is the utilitarian is you seek to achieve some sort of improvement in practice, and there is competition for improvement. Faster delivery time, lower prices, so on. So now we're going to talk about the case of Natasha Gopal. Natasha Gopal is a fast-rising executive in a major company, let's just say either in Western Europe or in the United States or Canada or whatever. And she has been given a foreign assignment to negotiate with the principals, the people who are the contracting agents, for a very big job that the company has in a country where men do not negotiate with women, at least not in business. So the company's had lots of experience with this, or at least some, and what they've done is they've often put women in charge of the whole project. The woman has stayed at the Intercontinental Hotel, come out with a team. The team of men has gone out. Everything has been phoned into her. She has participated in every decision they've made on site, and she has received credit when it is due, and indeed one or two women have been promoted on the basis of their handling of that type of situation alone. So Natasha is torn. Does she want to do business as usual, for which she feels reasonably assured she will get as much credit as if she had negotiated the agreement in person? Or does she want to try to make the world a better place at the risk of her job and her career by saying, no, I just can't do it? It's a different world now that we're dealing with. And she's torn between these two things, and we're obviously in a stage of pre-conventional morality of Kohlberg's three stages. And at one end of that is sort of, well, this is, I can go ahead and do it, or I cannot. What's my idea of the greatest good for the greatest number? Am I the greatest number? Me, myself, and I. Will my example be as useful, more useful than my refusal would have been in terms of making it a better world? And then at the other end of that continuum is sort of what I've just called the Emily Post model. The fork goes on the left, and so she goes to the Intercontinental and communicates with her team by telephone. So then comes post-conventional, where this is enshrined as a matter of law, or whatever you want to call it. The greatest good for the greatest number would be simply that these assignments have to be made on a reasonable basis to people who deserve them, whether they're men or women. And in this case, the company has already done that. And at the other end of the continuum is that universal law should provide that a person who has equal responsibilities should have equal status. So how do we resolve these contradictions? And that's the reasoning. And suppose you are, say, operating in Sweden or Switzerland or Denmark, and you're really in a state of near equality, where prime ministers are routinely women, and so on and so forth. Everybody's used to them. Everybody has to deal with them. Even the heads of the country to which where Natasha's job is have dealt with women when they've been heads of state, as they often have been. So, and then at the other hand, you have the system that we currently have in place in some situations, where the man, rather the woman, stays at the Intercontinental and sends out the orders to the people in the field. I might add parenthetically, for those people interested in current events, that that's what Hamas is doing right now. So it's not unusual. So I don't know. What do you think? Want to ask me some more questions? Got some thoughts?
Is it making it easier for her in that dignitaries are comfortable in working with women, but apparently not on the business side of her working with men.
Well, yeah, let's say project managers, the chief executive officer, who, for all we know, might be somebody whose headquarters is in the United States or in New York or London, might certainly be comfortable with her. But the project managers on the ground are not.
What are your feelings if you were her and you're going into this challenging territory? How would you handle it?
Well, I think that the question is whether we want to do what is likely to make the world a better place, in which case I definitely would refuse the assignment,
Hmm.
or whether or not I've got 3 kids in college and this is the way things are done, and nobody's ever been penalized inside the company for doing it this way. And so I guess I would go along with business as usual.
How would you do it though? Let's say that you move forward. You got to put up food on the table. It's not going to be comfortable, but you're going to suck it up and enter into I guess, the negotiations in territory where you're not exactly welcome. What tactics would you use? How would you navigate that if you were her?
Well, you've got two areas where you have to navigate it. First of all, you have to let the company has to allow you to accept the assignment under those terms. And I think that you've got a pretty strong cudgel you can use by saying ABC Corporation wouldn't let me go out there because wouldn't let me meet with the principals because I was a woman, and the women don't let me meet with principals. And what kind of a personnel human relations department is that, and policy? So you've got a pretty strong cudgel with the company to let you go. But once you got there, if the people won't meet with you, they can make all sorts of excuses, that avoid the truth of the matter, and it's your word against them. So then it becomes harder terrain to navigate.
Is there any grounds for discrimination?
Well, I think there might be, because you could argue, I don't know of any case that has ever tested this proposition, but you can argue that, oh yeah, you got the promotion all right, you got the internal recognition, you got the raise, but you lost out on a very significant and important professional experience and opportunity for professional development that you would have had were it not that you were a woman. So is this enough of a critical enough kind of discrimination to be actionable? I would argue that it is. I mean, when I look at these companies, when I look at my own career, the places that you go, the people you have been able to talk to, are very important. It's not just the things that you've written and the speeches that you've given to large audiences. All this goes into the mix, and I would have been deprived of some very important professional opportunities if, for whatever reason, there were people with whom I could not have met.
And let's face it, they could meet with her and just say, "Yeah, what you're offering is not what that doesn't align with us. So thank you. Be well. Good luck to you." It could, and there'd be no grounds to prove that wrong, but at least they met with her. the fact that they're not even entertaining meeting with a woman, uh, seems like there's some discrimination there. I mean, it's clear if they keep blowing her off that they won't meet. I think just for themselves, just to circumvent any challenges, that they should just meet, even if they don't plan to do business with her.
Well, what makes it actionable, it seems to me, is that they have not only caused her some professional harm, although it's hard to measure the damages, because a raise you didn't get or a bonus you didn't get can be measured in actual terms. But they have perhaps forfeited for their country
Hmm.
the best deal the country could have had.
Right.
And so you go on from there to make a fuss over the whole thing. Hopefully the company will, and so can you, because you're a witness. And maybe make the world a somewhat better place.
Hmm. And would they ever know that this could be the best deal ever for the country? Um, is that also subjectionable?
Well, of course it is. They could have put it up for competitive bid and selected this company out of a number of proposals they had. And so it was, at least at the time when they accepted it, it was the best offer they had. At least that was their considered judgment at the time. And I guess they just more or less assumed that they wouldn't have to deal with a woman. Even though they knew and accepted the fact that a woman might be calling the shots from her hotel suite.
In this scenario, I find it so interesting that at a higher level, women are accepted. From you, we talked about prime minister and such, but not on a business level. You would think it might trickle down.
Well, it has to some extent. I mean, the CEO of General Motors for many years has been a woman, and that's a factory business, a consumer business. It's not, say a television network or a film studio or an entertainment operation. It's a brick and mortar type operation, but certainly not, they aren't represented. They don't, not the same percentage that, and I would say further with respect to Mary Barra, who is the CEO of General Motors. Hats off to her. She overcame, obviously very significant predilection against her choosing a woman. But she overcame what, in my experience, has been an even bigger prejudice. She had actually worked for General Motors for many years. Companies like that don't generally give
Wow.
the top job to the inside person.
Wow. Kudos to her for getting that done.
Absolutely.
Wow. I just to pivot for a moment, um, they're growing incredibly. Even in the last year, the infrastructure and such, Amazon.
Right.
What's your initial view from an ethical standpoint in terms of how they do business?
Well, to be honest, I don't know that much about it, but their resistance to union organizing and the warehousing part of the business uh, has uh, has attracted some of my attention, and that's most of what you get these days, because I once worked for the National Labor Relations Board, and I think some of the things they have done to resist union organizing may be actually borderline unfair labor practices. in terms of their merchandising, their service, they're dealing with suppliers and so on. I know less about that. But certainly at the union end and the warehousing end, I think they deserve some attention. Let's put it that way.
What's your feeling overall on unions?
Oh, I think unions are great. I think that they are not only good for the people who belong to them, they're good for the people that don't. You look at a place where the union has organized or proven itself to be strong in a certain industry or certain place, and then you look at that company's competitors who have not been unionized. In most cases, you'll find they've raised the wages for the employee group that was unionized, just as a defensive measure.
It can be challenging. I'm dealing with somebody I know in my family that in the medical field where some are getting raises and some are not, and they're all unionized. So there's a lot of dissension there. Some of them, and these are medical professionals, just the way the structure is and the way they positioned it for this group of medical professionals, they don't have a baseline of salary history for them. Where in this other group, they do. So they could say, well, yeah, you should be making this in their organization. This other group, and it's not they're nurses, but their role has never been looked at in terms of salary history. So it's kind of like they're on standby when it comes to a salary increase. You could be making the same amount of money if you've been there for 4 years as if you would if somebody just walked in. So that's what I'm hearing on this union side challenge, and they may walk out.
Well, yes, and certainly as someone who, and I don't consider myself persecuted in that regard. I think virtually everyone is in the same situation. I've had more contact with the medical profession than I would like. But what I've noticed is that nurses are doing more and more and more. And it's often the case where you never see the doctor. The nurse preps you, puts you to sleep, and you wake up in the waiting room.
Yeah.
And in between, for all you know, the nurse performed the operation on a telephone conference with some doctor in Bangalore. I mean, it's certainly possible.
Well, I won't get into detail, but I do know of a New York City case where a prominent surgeon faced charges a few years ago because he was supposed to be performing the procedure, but an intern or somebody very low level were taking care of the procedures, and they exposed it. And it was a pretty high profile case a while back. He wasn't doing the
Not
work.
uncommon. Not uncommon.
Yeah, kind of scary when you think
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Because who's watching? You're not. You're out cold. You can't see.
That's right. That's the idea. Yeah.
Exactly. Fascinating stuff talking about the whole ethics side of all business, and I think we all take it for granted because we just make a purchase. We're not thinking of what's happening on the back end and what's driving it, but there's a lot behind it in terms of companies doing the right thing. Personally, I am a fan of Amazon. I'm not looking at it from a employee standpoint. That's a separate. I'm looking at it from the consumer standpoint, but they usually always do the right thing in terms of taking care of returns, challenges that come up. They seem to be fairly well organized in terms of how they provide service. And it's just getting better. Unfortunately, if you look at it, more trucks on the road, more pollution. I've got a warehouse center that was just built last year. I could be there. I could walk to it. It's that close in about 2 minutes. Light pollution. People opposed it. There's trucks in and out of there all the time, but what would be the alternative? Would that be happening someplace else, spread out? I don't know, but
Would the alternative be 10,000 consumers driving to that warehouse to pick up their purchase, as opposed to one truck delivering all of them? I don't know.
yeah. And the only unfortunate thing is, and it's a big one, is the demise of so many brick and mortars. Small business is just
Yes.
losing their foothold because, and even bigger ones are going out of business. Toys R Us being one of them years ago, because people just bought their stuff online from Amazon. And many times, if I'm going to make a purchase, if it's online or not, I'll just look to see if it's on Amazon. And you're not saving money typically, just for the convenience. The one button, they've got everything. They take care of it. We're in a one button society, really what it comes down to.
They've also got algorithms that log in your purchases, so they know what you've bought, and when they've got something in stock they think you might be interested in, you're the first to find out about it.
This is also very true, and we forget about that. Ronald, always fascinating talking with you and your viewpoints on everything. How do we reach you? Somebody's got a question. They maybe you want to engage in a debate about ethics, whatever it might be. How do we find you?
Well, Ronald.Berenbeim, BERENBEIM @gmail.com.
Easy enough. Appreciate you being here today. Truly do. And also happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Happy Thanksgiving to you too. And look forward to our next discussion.
Absolutely.
So long.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.